Whispers from the Enchanted Library. Before we step into the quiet night, I invite you to find a comfortable position. Let your arms and legs relax, your shoulders drop, and your breathing slow down. Inhale gently and exhale slowly again and again. Now imagine a place where the night never hurries and the stars tell stories older than time. A place where silence doesn't feel empty, but full, warm, and wise. Tonight, we travel to a forgotten corner of the world, to a place hidden beneath ivy and time, to the Enchanted Library. A place that doesn't show up on maps, but reveals itself only when the heart is quiet enough to listen. Tonight, you'll travel far beyond the ticking of time, past forgotten meadows and winding staircases, to a garden where dreams grow like flowers and sleep wraps around you like velvet. Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply. The journey begins now. Crescent moon, the story begins. The old clock tower had long stopped ticking. It stood silently at the edge of the village of Windmere, half hidden by climbing ivy and surrounded by trees that whispered in hushed tones. The villagers rarely spoke of it anymore, and children, if ever they wandered that far, tiptoed past it as though it could awaken. But inside the clock tower, time was not asleep. It was waiting. Amelia had always felt drawn to the old tower. Each evening, after closing the windows of her little cottage and setting her kettle on the stove, she would gaze out from her garden, just to catch a glimpse of it. Its silhouette rose darkly against the twilight sky, unchanging, still, patient. She was a quiet soul, Amelia. Her days were filled with teacups, tattered books, and hand-stitched quilts. She had no clock in her home, no ticking reminders of the world rushing forward. Perhaps that's why the clock tower called to her. It too had stopped keeping time. And one evening, as the sun yawned its last golden breath across the horizon, Amelia followed the wind. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out barefoot, feeling the soft grass beneath her feet. The breeze guided her gently, brushing her hair behind her ears, nudging her toward the clock tower with a familiar whisper. When she reached the tall iron gate, she found it was already open. The path leading to the tower was overgrown, but beneath the vines and wildflowers, the cobblestones still remembered the way. Each step felt slower, softer, as if the air thickened with dreams the closer she walked. The great wooden door of the clock tower creaked open with a low sigh. And inside, everything was dust and silence, but not emptiness. Not quite. The walls were lined with ancient gears and wheels, long still but not forgotten. In the center of the room stood the giant clock face, its hands frozen at 11:59. Amelia's fingers traced the edge of the dial. Just one more minute to midnight. And then she saw it. Behind the clock, where moonlight slipped in through a fractured pane, there was a door. It was round, with a brass handle shaped like a leaf. No lock. No keyhole. Just waiting. The moment she touched it, the air shifted. Not sharply, not with force, but with a softness that could only be described as invitation. The door opened with barely a sound. Beyond it was not the back wall of the tower. It was a garden. But this was no ordinary garden. The sky above shimmered in twilight, though no sun or moon could be seen. The grass glowed gently beneath Amelia's feet, casting silver reflections on the petals of the flowers. Trees arched protectively above, their branches tangled with soft lanterns that lit without flame. She stepped forward slowly, her breath catching. It smelled of lavender, honey, and old pages. A scent of things remembered from dreams. Birds sang songs in melodies no human had composed. And the wind, it whispered her name. Amelia. She turned, but no one was there. Instead, in the center of the garden stood a bench made of stone and moss. Beside it, a teapot steaming gently, though no fire burned nearby, and a book open waiting. She sat, and when she lifted the book, its pages were warm. The words glowed slightly, rearranging themselves as if being written in real time. "Dear dreamer," it read, "you have stepped beyond the tick of clocks and the edge of reason. You are now where sleep begins, and stories bloom without endings. Rest here, and let the night wrap around you. You are safe. You are seen. You are home." A tear traced the edge of Amelia's cheek. Not of sadness, but of recognition, as if she had waited her whole life to read those words. She leaned back, the book resting in her lap, the steam from the tea curling upward like a lullaby. The lanterns above swayed softly. The garden hummed with peace. And for the first time in many years, Amelia closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to arrive. Somewhere in the distance, a low chime echoed, deep and melodic, like the heartbeat of the stars. The clock tower hadn't ticked for decades. But now it had begun again. Only not in time, but in dreams. As Amelia rests in the garden of dreams, new paths await. Where do the lanterns lead? What secrets bloom after midnight? Let your breath slow and drift deeper. The garden of forgotten wishes. As Evelyn stepped through the door behind the emerald curtain, the silence gave way to a subtle melodic hum, like the quiet singing of wind through tall grass, or the memory of lullabies hummed by mothers long gone. The path beneath her bare feet was warm and soft, a trail of silver-dusted moss that sparkled faintly in the moonlight. All around her, stars shimmered in the air, not above, not in the sky, but within the very fabric of the space she had entered. She realized, with a slow inhale, that she had crossed into a place that existed outside of time. Here, she was weightless. Her thoughts, often crowded and tangled in the waking world, now floated gently like feathers drifting on a sleepy current. Before her stretched a vast garden, so lush, so quiet, that it almost felt like it was sleeping too. The trees had silver trunks and leaves the color of lavender mist. Flowers with petals like spun silk turned slowly to follow her, sensing her presence. A sign stood at the entrance. Written in glowing cursive, it read, "The Garden of Forgotten Wishes." Evelyn blinked. The words tugged at something inside her, a sense of longing, a distant ache she couldn't quite name. And yet, it wasn't painful. It was soothing, like remembering an old lullaby from childhood. She stepped into the garden. The air here smelled of vanilla, roses, and that indescribable scent of old paper and warm tea. Time didn't tick, it breathed, slow and steady. Inhale, exhale. Everything swayed to its rhythm. The petals, the grass, even her own heartbeat. She wandered between flower beds where glowing blossoms whispered softly. And then she heard it. "Do you remember the wish you made when you were 5? The voice came not from a person, but from a flower, an enormous bloom of deep indigo with glowing white veins that pulsed gently. Its voice was neither male nor female. It was the voice of a memory. "I don't think so," Evelyn whispered as though not to wake the garden. "You wished for the moon to be your friend. You cried to the stars, asking them to talk to you. And so they did." She laughed softly, the memory surfacing now like a bubble rising from a still pond. She had wished for that. Alone in her childhood room, face pressed to the window, she had whispered her dreams to the moon. "You never stopped wishing," said another flower, this one a soft blush pink with dew that sparkled like diamonds. "You just forgot." A breeze passed through the garden, and Evelyn felt it not just on her skin but in her soul. It rustled through the branches and stirred a low hum, almost like the entire garden was sighing in contentment. She kept walking. Each step brought her to a new memory disguised as a blossom. A daisy-shaped lantern told her of the time she wished her grandmother would never grow old. A violet murmured the wish she made at age 10 to live inside a book. A golden sunflower swayed and sang a tune from a dream she'd had, long ago, about dancing with fireflies on a cloud. She paused at a clearing. At its center stood a tree, tall, ancient, and glowing from within. Unlike the others, this tree had no leaves. Instead, hanging from its limbs were crystal orbs. Inside each orb shimmered a scene, a child blowing out birthday candles, a girl standing in the rain, a letter being tucked into a drawer. Evelyn understood. These were wishes that had been forgotten, not lost, but gently tucked away until their dreamers were ready to remember them. One orb pulsed with a faint pink glow. She reached out and touched it. In an instant, she was standing in a field. barefoot, arms outstretched, spinning slowly in a circle as flower petals rained down from a sky painted with lavender and peach. She felt younger, unburdened. She saw herself looking up at the sky and whispering, "I want to feel loved forever." The moment passed like a sigh, and she was back in the clearing, a tear slipping down her cheek, not of sadness, but of quiet recognition. The tree rustled its bare limbs. "You can't forget what was never truly lost," it whispered. She sat at the base of the tree, letting its presence wrap around her like a blanket. The grass curled gently around her like soft arms, and the sky above shifted to a deeper blue, flecked with silver stars that twinkled lazily. A butterfly landed on her shoulder. It was made of parchment and stardust. It whispered, "Rest now. The library will hold your wishes until you are ready to dream them again." And so she closed her eyes. Not the heavy kind of sleep that pulls like gravity, but the soft descent into the dream beneath the dream, where you are safe, warm, and whole. As Evelyn drifted, the garden whispered in lullabies older than the moon. "You are loved. You are known. You are not alone." And with that, she slept. Somewhere in the garden, a new flower bloomed, soft, blue, and bright as dawn. It held her newest wish, gently cradled in petals shaped like tiny hearts. The stars above the garden blinked once, and then everything was still. Previously on Whispers from the Enchanted Library, Marin, a gentle soul seeking peace, stumbled upon an ancient library hidden behind ivy-covered gates. Guided by an ethereal librarian named Alira, he began to explore a magical place where stories live, breathe, and gently carry weary minds into a realm of dreams. In Part 2, Marin discovered the Garden of Forgotten Time, where the scent of lavender and sounds of laughter soothed even the deepest scars of the soul. Now, the story deepens. The Room of Echoes and the River of Light. The evening breeze within the enchanted library was unlike anything Marin had felt before. It was not cold nor warm. It was memory itself, brushing gently across the skin. A whisper of things once felt, once dreamed. Alira, his ever-peaceful guide, moved through the corridors with the grace of starlight, her footsteps not echoing but harmonizing with the very air. As they turned into a corridor made of soft moss and flickering runes, she stopped before a pair of double doors made entirely of translucent crystal. When Marin drew closer, he realized that the doors weren't made of any material known to man. They shimmered and bent like water, and if one listened closely, they could hear music beyond them. "This is the Room of Echoes," Alira said in a voice as gentle as candlelight. "Here, the stories that were once forgotten return. They're not told by words, but by sound." With a faint touch, the doors opened. Inside was a vast chamber with no visible ceiling. The stars themselves seemed to spill from above, and at the center of the room stood what looked like a massive chime tree, its silvery branches moving without wind, its leaves singing soft notes that never clashed, only danced. Marin stepped inside slowly. With every footstep, he heard a soft sound arise from the floor. Bells, laughter, maybe the flutter of a bird's wing. It was hard to tell, but it was beautiful. "Alira, what is this place truly?" he asked, his voice sounding both small and eternal in the room's delicate echo. She smiled. "This is where hearts listen. Every soul has an echo, Marin. Sometimes they lose their voice in the noise of the world. But in this room, even a quiet soul can hear itself again." A seat emerged from the floor beside the chime tree, soft as cloud and sturdy as oak. Marin sat, and immediately, a soft vibration hummed beneath him. As he closed his eyes, the sounds around him formed a melody. His melody. He heard the rustling leaves of his childhood, the slow drip of rain on an old umbrella. He heard the echo of his grandmother's lullabies, faint but still alive. He heard the click of a typewriter, long abandoned. He heard tears falling, but not with sorrow, only with truth. As the sounds wrapped around him, Marin didn't speak. He simply listened, and in that listening, he rested. Minutes or hours later, Alira gently touched his shoulder. "It is time." Marin rose, lighter than before. It wasn't that his burdens had vanished. It was that he no longer clutched them. Together, they left the room of echoes and passed through an arched hallway lined with soft feathers embedded into the walls. They arrived at another chamber, this one glowing softly, as if lit from within. "This," said Alira, "is the River of Light." A hush fell over Marin as he beheld the sight before him. A narrow river, no wider than a path, flowed gently through the room, glowing with light not from above, but within its waters. The current shimmered in shades of gold, blue, and pearl, and every ripple carried a memory. "Step in," Alira urged, her voice somehow in the air and in his heart at once. "Let the river remember you." Marin hesitated, but only for a moment. As his feet touched the glowing waters, he felt warmth, not heat, but a gentle warmth that felt like home. The river didn't resist him. It welcomed him, as though it had been waiting. The current was so slow it felt like floating in time itself. Alira stood at the river's edge, watching, guiding, not as a guardian, but as one who knew he was safe. In the distance, images danced along the river's surface, some his own, some unknown. He saw a paper lantern drifting into the sky, a cat curled up beside an old man, a violin being tuned beneath a full moon. These were not just memories. They were moments, simple, eternal, without burden. The river gently carried him along until he reached a bend, and there, a bridge appeared. It was not a bridge made of stone or wood, but of woven moonlight, and at the bridge's end stood someone. It was himself, or perhaps a version of him, a younger self, eyes wide and curious, untouched by worry, yet familiar with pain. "You made it," the younger self whispered. "I didn't even know I was trying," Marin replied, smiling faintly. "We're always trying, even when we sleep, even when we forget." The two stood in silence, then slowly embraced. Not out of sorrow, but out of understanding. The bridge dissolved beneath them, but the moment remained. Alira reappeared beside him as the river slowly faded, leaving his feet resting again on the library's cool stone floor. "Was that real?" Marin asked softly. Alira simply nodded. "Everything here is as real as what your heart chooses to remember." They returned to the main hall, where the books now pulsed with a softer glow, as if the library itself had inhaled and now exhaled in peace. Marin sat on a cushion of velvet moss beside a fireplace that burned with blue flame but gave no smoke. He closed his eyes. The hum of the room was low and comforting, like the breath of a sleeping world. As Alira watched over him, she whispered, "The library is infinite, Marin, and it lives within you now." The story fades, and you feel yourself floating now, on your own river of light, your own echo of peace. Each breath you take now is slower, softer. Your thoughts have softened, like leaves gently touching the surface of a quiet pond. Let them drift. There is nothing left to do tonight. No worries to chase. No clocks to race. Only this soft glow inside your chest. And the distant voice of the library, still whispering stories just for you. Sleep now, traveler. Dream gently. Beyond the velvet curtains of the enchanted library lies a corridor that time itself forgot. In tonight's chapter, you'll journey with Alira into the realm of the clockmaker, a timeless world where gears whisper ancient lullabies and forgotten dreams tick quietly in the shadows. Close your eyes, let the ticking soothe you, and let sleep gently find you. Hourglass not done, the corridor of time. As the last echo of the forest's lullaby faded, Alira noticed something new in the library, a soft mechanical whirring, like the gentle turn of gears hidden behind a wall. The wind that curled around her ankles no longer smelled of moss and parchment. It carried the faint scent of polished brass and old oil. Following the sound, she passed shelves of dusty tomes and velvet armchairs until she reached a grand archway she had never seen before. Carved above the arch in curling silver letters was the phrase, where time waits for the dreamer. Without hesitation, Alara stepped inside. The corridor beyond was unlike any part of the library she had seen. The walls were smooth and metallic, lined with intricate pipes and delicate cogs that spun slowly in silence. Overhead, orbs of warm golden light pulsed gently, keeping a rhythm. Tick, 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 tock. At the end of the hall stood a magnificent door made entirely of glass and gold. As Alara reached for the handle, the door swung open on its own with a quiet sigh, revealing a workshop bathed in twilight. Mantelpiece clock, the clockmaker's domain. The room beyond was both alive and still. Hundreds of clocks ticked in soft harmony, from grand floor models with celestial faces to tiny pocket watches suspended in floating bubbles. Each one moved independently, and yet all kept the same perfect time. In the center of the room sat a tall, wiry man at a massive desk, his back turned to her. He wore a coat stitched with constellations and a monocle that shimmered with light from another dimension. Despite the silence, he spoke without turning. Alara, I've been expecting you. She approached slowly. How do you know my name? The clockmaker turned, revealing a face that looked neither young nor old. His eyes sparkled with infinite patience. Because time told me, he said with a gentle chuckle. I don't understand, she whispered. Time is not a river, child. It's a garden. Every moment is a seed, and every dream you've ever had has bloomed somewhere in its soil. He stood, towering and graceful, and gestured for her to sit. The chair that appeared beneath her was made of gears and cushions, and somehow fit her perfectly. Wrench fixing the broken hour. There is a clock, he said, unrolling a velvet cloth. Inside lay a single, broken watch. This is the heart of sleep. Every night, it winds the dreams of a million souls. But something has cracked it. Alara leaned closer. The tiny watch was beautiful, with hands that looked like falling feathers and a face that shimmered like moonlight. But its heartbeat was faint, and its hands were still. When it broke, the clockmaker said, a gap was formed in the dream world. Sleeplessness began to leak into waking minds. You must help me fix it. But how? Alara asked, mesmerized. You will find the 3 missing seconds, he said. Seconds. He nodded. Not time, but moments. Precious fragments that were lost. Each second is hidden inside a dreamer's forgotten memory. With that, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a glowing orb. Inside it danced a scene of a little boy sitting beneath a tree, staring at a kite caught in the branches. This is the first second, the clockmaker explained. It is called stillness. Go into this memory, Alara. Find what was lost. He handed her the orb. It pulsed gently in her palm, and she felt herself grow weightless, as if sleep itself was pulling her inward. Deciduous tree, the first dream, the boy and the kite. Alara opened her eyes to a soft breeze and the sound of birds. She stood in a sun-drenched meadow where the sky was a perfect canvas of blue. A small boy sat at the base of an ancient oak tree, hugging his knees. He looked up as she approached but didn't speak. Is your kite up there? She asked kindly. He nodded. Would you like help getting it down? He shook his head. It's not the kite. It's the last thing my dad gave me before he left. Appeared. A boat awaited her, shaped like a crescent moon. Without hesitation, Alara stepped in, and the vessel began to drift, cutting through the glittering waters. Around her, the stars began to hum again. Soft, low melodies, barely perceptible, like lullabies sung by mothers in dreams. The lake led her to an island surrounded by falling petals of light. On it stood a massive tree, its bark dark as night, but with veins of radiant silver pulsing beneath. It was the heart tree, the keeper had said, where the stories of stars came to rest. As Alara approached, the ground beneath her shimmered and took shape, a circle of memory. In the center, her own reflection appeared. But not just as she was now. It showed her as a child, clutching a notebook, eyes wide with wonder. Then it shifted to her at 16, reading poems aloud to no one. Then again, to a time she had forgotten, sitting by her grandmother's side, listening to bedtime tales of starlit kingdoms. Tears welled in Alara's eyes. These were her forgotten stars. She hadn't even known she'd lost them. The keeper's voice once again echoed, soft as breath. To remember is to awaken. To awaken is to bring light. She knelt beneath the heart tree and placed her palm on its bark. It pulsed with warmth. Suddenly, stars began to fall, not in tragedy, but in celebration, like a cascade of fireflies returning home. All around her, the garden shimmered brighter. The trees danced. The lake glowed. The stories were not forgotten anymore. Alara's heartbeat slowed. The calm in her chest was profound, the kind that one only finds after long journeys and quiet truths. She laid down on a bed of petal-soft moss beneath the heart tree and closed her eyes. The stars continued to sing, their song now richer with her story added to the chorus. And as sleep welcomed her gently, the garden held her close, another dream found, another whisper saved, another light rekindled. The library had changed again. Not drastically, not with crashing shelves or swirling portals. No, its magic was always gentler than that, like dreams shifting from one scene to another. Alara noticed it first in the way the shadows danced, elongated and twisting in elegant patterns upon the floor, and the soft scent of lavender that hadn't been there before. A new corridor had opened beyond the last aisle of mythology, lit by candlelight that floated midair. The glow pulsed rhythmically, almost as if it breathed. Alara reached for the cat-shaped candle holder floating nearest to her. The moment her fingers grazed its warm brass surface, a quiet murmur swept through the air, and the floor beneath her gently vibrated, like the hum of a distant purr. She glanced at Balthazar. "Shall we?" The librarian nodded solemnly. "This section hasn't appeared in over 100 years. You're quite favored." They stepped into the corridor, where the books lining the shelves shimmered, not with dust or gold, but with memory. Titles changed as you looked at them. One spine read The Gentle Night of Windfall, then morphed into songs the moon forgot to sing. Alara reached for it, but Balthazar held out a hand. "Not yet," he said. "This wing is called the Archive of Forgotten Dreams. Each book holds a dream someone once had, but never remembered." Alara blinked. "You mean dreams from people's sleep?" "Exactly," Balthazar whispered. "Some are tiny, just flickers of joy or longing. Others are entire worlds. They gather here when forgotten. And sometimes when someone like you arrives, the dreams awaken." She felt the air thrum around her. A soft breeze wound through the stacks, carrying with it a sound, music maybe? Notes, like the twinkling of wind chimes and distant lullabies, as if the dreams were calling her. One book leapt from the shelf. Not violently. It simply floated forward and hovered before her, pages flapping gently. The cover was a rich velvet blue with a title written in stardust, The Cloud Ship of Captain Oriel. Alara gasped. "I know this name." Of course she did. It had been a recurring dream in her childhood. A ship that sailed through clouds, collecting moonlight and delivering dreams in glass bottles to sleeping towns. She had forgotten it. Entirely. And yet, now the memory came rushing back as though someone had turned on the stars inside her. "I dreamed this," she murmured, "when I was 6. But I haven't thought of it in decades." "That's why it's here," Balthazar said. "The forgotten dreams always come home." The book opened itself, and Alara saw not words, but moving illustrations, like miniature theater performances. A cloud ship, elegant and glowing, sailed above the rooftops of a sleeping town, the sound of harp music echoing softly in the background. "Would you like to go inside it?" Balthazar asked, his voice low. Alara blinked. Inside the dream, Balthazar simply smiled and touched the page. There was a shimmer, a shift, and then quiet. She was standing on a ship made of clouds and driftwood, its sails spun from spider silk and starlight. The deck was soft beneath her feet, like walking on morning mist. The sky around her shimmered with soft purples and sleepy blues, stars twinkling lazily overhead. "Welcome aboard," cried a voice behind her. Alara turned to see a tall figure in a shimmering coat of twilight feathers. She wore a captain's hat cocked to one side and had one eye that sparkled like a nebula. "I'm Captain Oriel." Alara laughed in disbelief. "I remember you." Oriel grinned. "Of course you do. You just forgot." Around them, tiny winged creatures, perhaps made of fog and fireflies, fluttered about, tending to glowing glass bottles. Some were pink with dreams of laughter, others deep green with adventure. One bottle glowed gold and hummed with a lullaby. "We collect what's needed," Oriel said, gesturing to the bottles. "A dream of courage for a child starting school. A whisper of peace for a tired heart. Or sometimes just nonsense. Dancing mushrooms, singing whales, that sort of thing. The world needs wonder too." The ship rocked gently, and Alara leaned over the side. Below, a village slept in moonlight. Through the mist, she could see rooftops and gardens, the quiet shape of dreams drifting toward the windows. Oriel handed Alara a bottle. "Would you like to deliver one?" she asked. "This one's meant for a woman who's lost her sense of magic. A dream to remind her how to wonder." Alara held the bottle and felt it pulse in her hands. It was warm. She looked down at the sleeping village and smiled. "I think I know what that feels like," she whispered. "Exactly," Oriel said. "That's why only dreamers can help us." Alara dropped the bottle gently, watching it float downward like a glowing firefly. When it reached the window of a small house, it passed through the glass without a sound. Inside, a woman sleeping curled in a chair smiled in her dreams. A gentle chime rang. "One more soul touched," Oriel said, "and a little magic restored." They continued on, visiting village after village. Alara learned how to hum the dream-summoning tunes, how to blend moonlight into hope, and how to laugh again without reason. She had never felt so light, so dreamlike. Eventually, the ship turned toward a cloud tunnel glowing in the distance. "Time to return," Oriel said gently. "Even dreamers must wake." "But I don't want to leave," Alara said, clutching the ship's railing. "You won't leave," Oriel smiled. "You'll remember." A bottle was placed in Alara's hands. It shimmered with soft silver light and was labeled with her name. "For you," Oriel said. "A gift. When you sleep again, you'll find me." The cloud ship spun gently, stars trailing behind it like glitter, and the dream began to fade. She awoke in the archive of forgotten dreams, still holding the velvet blue book. Balthazar stood nearby, his arms crossed and his eyes soft. "How long was I gone?" she asked. "No more than 3 heartbeats," he replied. "But I imagine it felt longer." She looked at the book, now closed, and pressed it to her chest. "I dreamed. No, I remembered," she said. "You did," Balthazar nodded. "And now, part of that world lives in you again." As they moved through the corridor once more, Alara noticed the books were no longer just whispering. They were singing. Tiny melodies of forgotten joy and remembered love. A door appeared at the far end. Unlike the others, this one shimmered like a mirror, reflecting not just her face, but moments from her past, childhood giggles, bedtime stories, adventures in fields long paved over. The door swung open with a breath of warm air. Beyond it was a room she hadn't seen before. It was not a library. It was a nursery of dreams. The labyrinth of forgotten names. The gentle hush of the enchanted library lingered in the air, even as Aurora and Eli stepped beyond its ancient shelves and into a place where the fabric of memory itself twisted and curled like smoke. The book in Aurora's hands had flipped to a page with no ink, only the faint scent of lavender and the thrum of unseen energy, and suddenly, The walls around them had shimmered into something else entirely. They now stood at the threshold of what appeared to be an ancient maze carved into a misty hillside. Tall hedges towered over them, dense and wild, though not made of plants. Instead, the walls were composed of countless names written in glowing script, some in flowing cursive, others etched in angular runes, and still others painted like stardust across velvet. Each name pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat or a sigh. A soft voice drifted through the mist. Only those who remember themselves may find the way. Aurora stepped forward cautiously, her boots silent against the mossy ground beneath. Eli, who had turned into a softly glowing owl in this new realm, perched on her shoulder, feathers bristling with nervous curiosity. "This is the labyrinth of forgotten names," he murmured. "No one enters unless they are ready to remember what the world tried to erase." Aurora blinked. "Whose names are these?" "All those who lost themselves," Eli said. "To time, to sorrow, to silence." The moment they entered the labyrinth, the air thickened with memory. Aurora could feel it pressing gently on her shoulders, like a familiar voice calling from behind a veil. As they walked forward, each pathway in the maze glimmered with faint trails, as if inviting or warning. She turned a corner and came face to face with a reflection, her own, but it was not the Aurora she knew. This version of herself wore a crown of withered stars, and tears shimmered down her cheeks, silver as moonlight. "Do you know your name?" the reflection asked, voice trembling like wind through dry leaves. Aurora hesitated. The moment she did, the maze shifted. The path beneath her feet slid away like sand, and she and Eli were whisked down a winding corridor of light and shadow. They tumbled softly, dreamlike, until they landed in a circular clearing where names hung like lanterns from invisible threads above. Eli shook himself back into human form and brushed dust off his jacket. "That was a test," he said, sighing. "This labyrinth, it doesn't just want your name. It wants your truth." "I know who I am," Aurora said, but her voice sounded less certain than before. She looked up and read some of the names suspended in the air. Isolde of the Wind, Kai of the Ocean's End, Threnna, Dream Scribe, Unnamed One. That last name flickered, struggling to hold form, and something in Aurora's chest twinged, like a key turning halfway in a lock. They ventured deeper. In each corner of the labyrinth, stories played like memories drifting from the air itself. In one, a young girl sat on a rock, sketching stars into the sand, only for the tide to wash them away every time. She did not cry. She simply drew again. In another, a warrior laid down his sword and whispered his name to a tree. The tree wept blossoms in return, then closed its bark over the name, keeping it forever. In yet another, a child laughed as she chased glowing fireflies, only for her laughter to echo and fade until she forgot what had made her happy at all. These are lives, Aurora realized, and the names that held them. "Yes," Eli said, watching her closely. "Some remembered, most forgotten. But every name here still glows because someone once spoke it with love." They came upon a stone well at the heart of the labyrinth. Mist spiraled from it, and names floated on its surface like fallen leaves. Eli leaned over and whispered something to the well. A name. The mist swirled and parted. Aurora stepped closer and gasped. A vision rose from the water. A small cottage on a hill, with fireflies dancing in the grass. A woman stood at the doorway, her hands covered in flour, laughing. A younger Aurora ran to her, arms wide. "Mom," Aurora whispered, tears pricking her eyes. The woman looked up, and her voice rang through the clearing like a lullaby. "Aurora, you used to name the stars when you were little. Do you remember?" Aurora's heart ached. "No, but I want to." The vision faded, but the warmth lingered. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is your trial. You must reclaim the name you gave away." Aurora turned back to the labyrinth walls. Her eyes scanned the names, faster now, heart pounding. At the edge of the far wall, flickering softly, she saw one, Aurora of the Unwritten Sky. The moment she said it aloud, the maze began to unravel. The names lifted like birds, wings of silver and light, and the hedges peeled away into wisps of smoke. The mist cleared. The library's scent returned. Leather, ink, lavender, and old dreams. She was standing once again between the shelves of the enchanted library, but something inside her had changed. A thread had been retied, a wound mended. Eli turned back into his owl form and hooted softly. "You remembered," he said. "You passed." Aurora touched her chest, where a soft glow now pulsed, a name restored, a story reclaimed. But the book had more pages to turn. As the light of the labyrinth faded behind her, a new door opened ahead, its frame made of crystal and woven vines, its hinges carved with ancient runes. "The next part of the journey," Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper, "takes us to the garden of slumbering echoes." Aurora nodded. She was ready. But even as they stepped forward, the names from the labyrinth echoed behind them, soft as breath, eternal as stars. Aurora, Kai, Isolde, Threnna, the unnamed, the remembered. The morning mist drifted lazily across the quiet floor of the enchanted library as Alara and Thistle emerged from the glowing archway. Behind them, the spiral portal shimmered and then softly disappeared, like dew retreating from the rising sun. They now stood in a garden that defied the very concept of time. It stretched beyond the horizon, filled with impossibly tall flowers, crystal-clear ponds that reflected the stars even in daylight, and vines that curled into shapes of musical notes and written words. It was peaceful, eerily peaceful, and full of unspoken memory. "This," Thistle whispered reverently, "is the garden of forgotten dreams." Alara turned slowly, her gaze catching sight of a swing hanging from a silver-barked tree. It swayed gently, though there was no breeze. Nearby, a carousel spun slowly, its carved horses worn and ancient, though still graceful and proud. "People's dreams end up here?" Alara asked. "Not all dreams," Thistle said, his tone distant. "Only the ones that were once deeply loved but eventually left behind. Abandoned dreams, faded wishes, forgotten promises to oneself. They root here and grow in silence." Alara wandered toward a bed of glowing tulips. Each one pulsated with a soft light. As she bent down to observe, a petal unfurled and whispered a child's voice. "One day, I'll become an astronaut and see the stars up close." She blinked, startled. "It's echoing a memory," Thistle explained gently. "A dream someone once had and then forgot, as life rushed forward." A profound stillness wrapped around Alara's heart. She stepped carefully between the luminous flowers, listening to the dreams murmured on the wind. "I'll write a book. I'll paint the ocean in every shade I can find. I'll never stop dancing. One day I'll travel the world." Some voices were filled with joy. Others carried regret. All were deeply human. "I don't know if I want to forget my dreams," Alara murmured. "You don't have to," Thistle replied. "That's why we came." At the heart of the garden stood a fountain carved from moonstone, its waters swirling with soft light. Suspended above it was a key, delicate, translucent, and shimmering like dragonfly wings. "The Dreamkeeper's key," Thistle said, his voice low. "One of the last you need to unlock the final chapter of the library." Alara approached the fountain, the dreams around her gently rustling in encouragement, or warning. As she neared the key, her mind began to fill with her own memories, of stories she had wanted to write, places she dreamed of visiting, promises she made to herself during quiet midnight moments. The garden was testing her. Each step closer to the fountain made her question, which dreams had she forgotten? Which had she given up on? The key glowed brighter as she reached out, but before she could grasp it, a voice echoed from behind. "Alara." It was soft, feminine, familiar. She turned and saw herself, or rather, a younger version of herself, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, wearing a paper crown and holding a crayon-drawn map in hand. "You promised we'd build a castle in the sky," the child Alara said quietly. Tears sprang to Alara's eyes. "I did. You promised we'd never be afraid of falling, because we had wings." "I remember," Alara said, kneeling to her younger self's level. "And I never meant to forget." The child reached out, touching Alara's heart. "Then promise again." Alara smiled through her tears. "I promise. No matter how old I get, I will not forget us." At that moment, the key descended slowly into her hand, weightless and warm. The garden sighed as if satisfied, and and the carousel in the distance slowed to a halt. Thistle nodded in approval. You remembered not only your dreams but yourself. The key shimmered with starlight and dissolved into her palm, its essence now a part of her. The final door awaits, Thistle said, as a golden path lit up before them. As they turned to leave, Alara looked back once more. A new flower had bloomed behind her. This one pulsed with a brighter light than the others. It whispered her voice. One day, I will write a story so powerful, it will help others remember their own dreams. Alara's heart lifted. The garden had not only kept forgotten dreams. It had now begun to keep remembered ones too. The mirror of forgotten dreams. As the golden light of dawn threatened to pierce the endless twilight of the enchanted library, Marin and the Whisper Keeper arrived at a narrow, spiral staircase made of glass. Each step shimmered as if spun from morning dew and moonlight. It wound upward and downward, offering two directions, yet only one choice. Upward, the Whisper Keeper said softly, gesturing with a flick of his silvery hand. The mirror awaits. Marin's heart fluttered, half in fear, half in awe. She took the first step, and the glass beneath her feet didn't crack or tremble. It welcomed her weight with warmth. Up she climbed, her breath light, her thoughts even lighter. They emerged into a room unlike any other in the library. It was circular, the walls covered with silky blue drapes that moved though there was no wind. In the center stood an arched mirror, 10 feet tall, framed by twisting silver vines and tiny glowing crystals. The mirror of forgotten dreams, whispered the Whisper Keeper. Here is where all dreams that were once cherished but set aside come to rest. Not nightmares, not mere wishes, true dreams. The ones that defined you. Marin approached slowly. The mirror's surface was not reflective, at least not in the ordinary way. It shimmered like the surface of a still pond, yet held depth beyond imagination. Will I see my dreams? She asked. You'll see your truest self, he replied, but only if you let the mirror show you. Not what you expect, but what you need. The moment her fingers brushed the silver frame, the entire room stilled. The drapes froze midway. Even the whisper of breath halted. The mirror darkened, then began to glow. It showed a little girl in a field of marigolds, chasing after paper birds. Marin gasped. That was her as a child. Then came flashes, a journal clutched to her chest, drawings pinned to her wall, a telescope aimed at the stars, eyes bright with wonder. She saw the dream of being an explorer of galaxies, a writer of worlds. She remembered scribbling stories long past bedtime, the adventures she imagined while swinging on old trees. Then she saw time pass. School desks, quiet discouragement, papers returned with red ink, the telescope gathering dust. Tears welled in her eyes. She had not abandoned those dreams, not completely, but they had been shelved, quieted. The image in the mirror shifted again. Now she saw herself as she could be, standing on a floating book, pen in hand, writing stories that became constellations, watched by readers across the world. Her dreams had not died. They had waited. She turned to the Whisper Keeper, voice shaking. Is this real? Could I still become that? He stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the frame. Dreams forgotten are not dreams gone. They live here, waiting for their dreamers to return. You carry the light of your imagination still. This mirror only reminds you of what you already know. As the mirror faded back into mist, Marin felt lighter. Not because a burden had been lifted, but because hope had returned. The Whisper Keeper smiled. You are ready for the final chamber. Final, she whispered. He nodded. The sanctuary of sleep. They descended the glass stairs in silence. Marin felt her body beginning to tire, but not the tiredness of exhaustion. It was the gentle weariness of a journey well traveled, the kind that invited peaceful rest. They passed through a passageway lined with books that softly hummed lullabies. The lights dimmed, becoming softer and warmer with each step. Velvet carpets replaced marble floors. The air grew thick with the scent of lavender and old parchment. At last, the doors opened into a vast chamber with no walls, only soft stars and drifting clouds. Pillows, blankets, and canopies floated gently above a still lake. The room was quiet, so quiet it felt like time had stopped to take a breath. Marin turned to the Whisper Keeper. "Is this goodbye?" He nodded solemnly. "Only for now. You may return whenever you wish. The library will wait." He handed her a tiny, glowing feather. "For your pillow," he said with a wink. "To remember." She smiled, tears sparkling in her eyes. "Thank you for everything." As she settled onto a floating bed and closed her eyes, the last thing she heard was the gentle turning of a page, the door beyond the stars. The silence in the enchanted library had changed. Not vanished, not broken, but evolved. It was the kind of silence that holds its breath, waiting for something extraordinary. As Alara stepped beyond the last aisle, the world around her shifted again, not abruptly, but like a page curling gently in the breeze. The soft scent of old books gave way to a sharper aroma, crisp starlight and something metallic and ancient, like the inside of a forgotten telescope. In the center of the marble floor was a final pedestal. Unlike the others, this one had no book, just a key. It shimmered with a soft, opalescent glow, humming faintly as if it had been waiting for her for centuries. Alara reached out. The moment her fingers curled around the key, the entire room trembled, but gently, as if welcoming her into an embrace. A section of the far wall melted into starlight, revealing a narrow arched doorway. On the other side, the sky was not dark, but filled with constellations moving slowly, forming patterns like ancient runes. A path of translucent stone extended through the door and out into that cosmic tapestry. Alara turned to look at the owl. "Is this the final chapter?" she whispered. The owl blinked once, slowly. Then it flew up, circled her once, and soared through the doorway, wings glowing with stardust. Alara followed. Each step took her deeper into a space that felt vast and yet comfortingly close, like the inside of a dream. The stars pulsed softly, responding to her thoughts. Her memories flickered among them, her childhood curiosity, her grandmother's lullabies, the first time she opened a book and got lost inside its world. As she walked, the path bent slightly upward. Not steeply, just enough to feel like she was climbing towards something larger than life itself. Then she saw it. A library, but not like the one she had left. This one was shaped like a spiral galaxy, its shelves floating in space, each book orbiting gently, tethered by silvery threads of thought. Celestial beings moved among them, guardians of knowledge, dream architects, weavers of destinies. And at the center, a throne made not of power, but of story. The voice that met her was neither male nor female, neither old nor young. It simply was. "You have completed the journey of sleep and story," it said, each word curling softly around her mind. "You have remembered what was always inside you." Alara felt tears, not of sadness, but of deep knowing. "I thought I came to this library to fall asleep," she said. "No," the voice replied with a smile in its tone. "You came to awaken your imagination. And in doing so, you have helped others sleep." The library shimmered. "You may return now," the voice continued, "or remain. Your stories will find you either way." Alara looked down at the path she had walked, then back at the starlit library. She sat gently on the edge of the floating shelf, closed her eyes and whispered, "Let someone else find me in their dreams." Back in the world, outside the enchanted library, the real Alara slept soundly. A small smile curved her lips. The soft breeze fluttered the curtains, and on the nightstand beside her bed, her journal was open. Written in her own handwriting, though she didn't remember writing it, were the words, "Dreams are not escapes. They are invitations. And tonight, I accepted mine. Let the stars cradle your thoughts. Let the silence lull you deep. You've reached the final page. Now surrender to sleep." As the moon bathed the enchanted library in silver light, Aurelia, Elias, and Mistral sat quietly beneath the great astral tree, whose roots whispered lullabies into the soil and whose branches cradled the stars themselves. The Chronicle of Whispers had closed once more, its golden lock sealed gently by the magic of fulfilled purpose. But its pages glowed faintly with warmth, as if promising the stories within would never fade. Elias turned to Aurelia. "Will the library sleep again?" he asked, his voice barely more than a breath. She smiled softly. "Yes, until the world needs dreams again. Mistral nuzzled closer, her scales shimmering with sleepy starlight. But some dreams never end. Some stay with you, woven into the very fabric of your being. High above, constellations danced in slow spirals. The twins who built bridges across impossible time. The dreamwalker, the watcher of winds, all honored in the firmament, keeping the stories alive. The librarians of time and magic began to slowly vanish into the corridors of the library, their tasks complete for now. The floating globes dimmed, and books stacked themselves in tidy rows, like children tucked into bed. The enchanted library exhaled, and in that long, gentle breath, the entire realm began to hum a lullaby older than stars, written not in ink, but in peace. As the dream mist curled tighter around the great shelves, Elias looked at his reflection in a polished mirror beside the astral stairwell. He no longer looked like just a boy. He looked like a keeper of stories. He reached for Aurelia's hand, and together they walked into the softest corner of the library, where the stories waited not to be read, but to be dreamt. The lights slowly faded. The clock chimed once, and everything stilled, wrapped in comfort, warmth, and the boundless hush of dreams. Sleep now, dear listener. Let the library's magic fold around you like a soft blanket, and may your dreams carry you beyond stars, beyond time, to places only you can imagine. Good night. The Garden of Lost Wishes. In the dreamlike haze of early dawn, Eloin and Mira stepped out of the library's ancient side gate. It creaked open with a sound like an old sigh, revealing a spiral path lined with lavender and moonflowers, each glowing faintly in the morning mist. The dew on the petals shimmered like pearls, and a soft wind carried a scent that reminded them of memories they hadn't yet lived. Where are we now? Mira whispered, her voice reverent. Eloin smiled gently. This is the Garden of Lost Wishes, a place where dreams once forgotten take root in soil woven from hope and time. A grand willow tree stood at the center of the garden, its silver leaves trembling with an unseen melody. Surrounding it were floating orbs, each humming softly and glowing with pastel light, some pink, others green or violet. Each orb held a wish whispered into the world and forgotten, yet still yearning to be fulfilled. Eloin led Mira to a small stone bench beneath the willow, where a cluster of fireflies blinked in rhythmic harmony, like a lullaby in lights. People believe that when they lose a wish, it's gone forever, Eloin said. But here, nothing is truly lost. Wishes become seeds. Some bloom when someone remembers them. Others wait quietly for the right soul to pass by. Mira leaned forward, watching the orbs swirl slowly. She could hear fragments of voices, childhood hopes, silent prayers, soft dreams once uttered under stars. A warm orb floated toward her, landing gently in her lap. She closed her eyes and listened. A tiny voice spoke from within. I wish I had the courage to sing, even if my voice trembled. A tear slid down Myra's cheek, not of sadness but of quiet recognition. That was mine, she murmured. The orb pulsed, brighter now, and then lifted, drifting into the willow's leaves. One silver leaf turned gold and fluttered to the ground like a blessing. Eloin picked it up and handed it to Mira. Every wish you acknowledge becomes part of your truth, he said softly. It doesn't matter how old the dream is. The moment you remember it, it remembers you. They sat in stillness, surrounded by the warmth of longing, fulfillment, and forgiveness. A gentle chime rang in the air, marking a new chapter in Myra's soul. As the willow leaves rustled and sunlight spilled in dappled patterns, the Garden of Lost Wishes embraced them, quietly, eternally. And so, with hearts lighter and spirits awakened, they rose and continued on.